Hello, my name is Chase Ellis. I am a senior in the Distinguished Scholars Political Science program at Olathe North, and my project is over memory, how it works, and the flaws with our current way of teaching. Today, I'll be covering why this project is important to me, the research behind memory and some of the common misconceptions, and finally, I will talk about how it can be applied to the way we teach kids. Memory is a part of our everyday lives, whether it's from memorizing a pitch for your meeting or remembering to bring milk home on the way home, all the way down to remembering what I said at the beginning of this sentence. Memory is something that I have been good at my whole life. When I was about 3 years old, I was introduced to NASCAR. This is one of the first times I discovered how good my memory actually was. There are 43 race car drivers in NASCAR, each with their own car, number, sponsor, and car owner. At 3 years old, if you were to give me any driver's name, I could give you his number, sponsor, and owner within seconds. I could list these three Hello, my name is Chase Ellis. I am a senior in the Distinguished Scholars Political Science program at Olathe North. My project is over memory, how it works, and the flaws with our current way of teaching. Today, I'll be covering why this project is important to me, the research behind memory, and some common misconceptions. Finally, I will talk about how it can be applied to the way we teach kids. Memory is a part of our everyday lives, whether it's memorizing a pitch for your meeting or remembering to pick up milk on the way home, all the way down to remembering what I said at the beginning of this sentence. Memory is something that I have been good at my whole life. When I was about 3 years old, I was introduced to NASCAR. This was one of the first times I discovered how good my memory actually was. There are 43 race car drivers in NASCAR, each with their own car, number, and sponsor. At 3 years old, if you were to give me any driver's name, I could tell you his number, sponsor, and owner within seconds. The average 3-year-old only knows about 200 words, and I was able to remember over 172 names, numbers, and sponsors without hesitation. The following year, if any drivers changed numbers or information, I could remember both the old and the new. Now, this is an example of long-term memory. Long-term memory is often the type people think of when they think of memory. Long-term memory is information that is stored in your brain to be remembered for a long period of time. However, there are 3 other classifications of types of memory, the first being sensory memory. Sensory memory holds sensory information for your brief periods of time, usually about a second or less. You often find this type of memory without even realizing it. For example, when you hear birds chirping or when you notice someone is walking around you. This type of memory will be stored for a few seconds and you acknowledge them and then they're deemed unimportant. If you notice, these next 2 types are linked together, often because they're interchangeable. Working memory is remembering parts of a complex math problem or knowing which step of a recipe you're on. Short-term memory is similar in that it is quickly forgotten, but it is stored in a different part of the brain and thus remembered for longer than a working memory would. Now, here's where my project comes in. The way our curriculum is set up is we learn a topic for 2 to 4 weeks, and then we're tested over the knowledge in the said unit. In theory, this is a great system because we're learning concepts and then tested over them. However, with the number of sports and clubs and activities that students are involved in, the allotted study time over those 2 to 4 weeks gets crammed into the day before. Now, when those students take the test, they may get a great score, giving the impression that they remember the materials, but in actuality, it is only in their short-term memory. In order for something to be transferred from short-term memory to long, it needs to have spaced repetition. The information processing model of memory characterizes human memory much like a computer. Information enters the short-term memory, and then some of the information is transferred into long-term memory, much like the information being saved to the hard disk of a computer. Memories that are frequently accessed become stronger and easier to recall. Accessing these memories over and over again strengthens the neural networks in which the information is encoded, leading to the easier recollection of the information. For my own research, I conducted a study with 2 groups of students, each given the task to remember 10 words. I had one group study for 30 minutes the night before I tested them, and then had a second group study for the same 30 minutes, but spread it out in 5-minute increments for 6 of the 7 days leading up to the test. The words I used here were from a concussion test used to test the working memory, so the words are fairly simple. The average non-concussed person should be able to recall at least 5 of the 10 words. This first graph shows the scores of the first group. Since they only looked at the words during one session, the words were stored in their short-term memory unless they didn't retain the information a week later when I tested them again. Their average scores decreased about 22%. Now, if we compare those scores to the second group, who split their time up throughout the week, you'll immediately see the increased scores. The average scores only decreased 4%, while 3 out of the 5 students had the same or increased scores. A German psychologist named Ebbinghaus did a similar experiment to this, where he memorized made-up words and tested himself memorizing them. His results created what is known as the forgetful curve, which is the line you can see on the bottom. However, the second line you see up at the top is what happens when you repetitively look at the words over time. The results of the test show, my test show a similar hypothesis, proving that my trend is correct in proving the importance of repetitive studying. When you take a test for a class, that is typically the last time you'll be asked about the information until the final. Because of this, students cram before the night of the test and then forget it all in a week. So then what's the point of spending the class time for learning in the first place? Now, I'm not trying to say that testing should be removed altogether. I think the best option would be to spend 5 minutes of the class reviewing something from the year or having frequent quizzes over the past information. In this case, students are seeing the information several times throughout the year. And even if they get it wrong the first couple times, they're getting information that they're seeing it, and then they will remember it in the long run. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.